So, hey everyone, welcome to this special event with literary agent and author Rachel McMillan. And I want to emphasize the author part of that. She is in the trenches, she knows what it's like. So, Rachel is the author of the Herringford and Watts mysteries, the Van Buren and DeLuca mysteries, which I love, the Three
Oh,
Quarter Time series, the London Restoration, and the Mozart Code, which I read over Christmas, Rachel. Mozart.
oh,
And her latest is a collaboration with two other writers called The Liberty Scarf. So, and she's also a literary agent.
mhm.
So she's here today in that capacity. And she's going to talk to us about how to write the most compelling query letters so that you have a good shot at interesting an agent, and then take some questions generally
Yes,
on the query process. So over to you, Rachel. Let's dive
that's
in.
great. So here's the deal. If you want to ask a question, I'm seeing these comments. Hello, San Antonio. One of my best friends lives in San Antonio, so I'm fond of that city. Hello, Norway. Yay. Um, Arizona. I like your iced tea. So the thing to remember here is that if you're not comfortable to ask a question on the screen, you can also put it in the comments. And Northern California, hurrah! That is a beautiful state. Cambridge, UK. Okay, everybody's here. This is so cool. Ireland. Oh, how's your weather? That's my brother lives in Ireland. There's been some stuff. Anyway, rambling here, but if you're watching this on replay, please do reach out. I am the easiest person to find online, and you can absolutely write me. My handle everywhere for everyone to know is Rach K Mick, RACHKMC, at Twitter, on Threads, on Instagram. And if you have a question later, please do write me. Or if you have a quick question about something else, please do write me. Hello, London, UK. Um, So, yes, I have been a literary agent. It's going on 8 years now. I represent 32 clients now across 4 continents. It's a lot of work. I also am currently, well, I have one book that was supposed to be out last July, but actually it needed more and more edits. So my team at Harper has been very patient with me, but it really shows you how difficult publishing is. You know, you work on deadlines, but sometimes it's really tough. So I'm concurrently writing 3 new books, and it's very difficult. But I also worked in corporate publishing for 11 years here in Toronto. And I've basically worked all sides of the publishing industry. I love being a literary agent because I have a much easier time selling and working on other people's books than I do on my own. And I know what it's like to try and get an agent and the ups and downs of publishing. And I wanted to preface by saying, I know that query letters are really, really, really difficult. Okay. I know that they're tough. Um, and I want to reiterate that the reason they're tough is because they are so essential. You have to remember that agents get hundreds of thousands of queries. And the purpose of the query letter is to inspire us to even open an attached document of your writing or even request a sample of your writing. Without a query that entices us, we won't actually ever read your writing. And that's one of the kind of sad business elements of the publishing industry is you wish it was based on writing, and it is in many instances, but the query letter has to compel us enough that we want to see more because we have to get through so many. And I have taught queries a lot. And another thing I do is query critiques. I do hundreds of these a year. And I always charge at least 50% less than everybody else because I want to keep everything. But if you're interested in a query critique from me, I usually do query letter, synopsis, and 15-page sample writing. I can get for you in a little package. I'm not here selling it. I'm just saying if you want further help, do reach out to me because I actually do hundreds of these, and people get agents and book deals, and it's fun because I love queries. So one of the things I wanted to do with you today is show you in a few minutes a query letter from a client that I'm showing you with his permission, that actually led to my signing him, because I read the query letter and I was like, oh, and then immediately said, can I get a full manuscript? And then, and this rarely happens because we get so many manuscripts and we have so much going on with our current clients that it's really hard to keep on top of reading fulls and partials. But I just happened to clear away a weekend and read the whole thing at once. So it's a really good query letter. Is it a perfect query letter? No, because I don't think there is such a thing. But it's a query letter that was perfect for this agent. And you have to remember that all you need is one yes. Whether you're on the publishing side or whether you're on the querying side, you just need that one yes. I would say for the most part, gone are the days with these, you hear of them sometimes, but auctions from many different publishers bidding on a book. That's not the way publishing is going right now. It's getting harder and harder to find a traditional publishing slot. Obviously, I am super advocating for writing in whatever way you like. I represent many hybrid authors. I am not someone who's ever going to dismay people who want to pursue independent publishing. However, for this track, we know that query letters are really integral in getting an agent's attention. So I am going to try and share my screen here. Share desktop 1. Oh, are you really doing this? Sorry, guys. I had practiced this earlier. No. Rhonda, if I send this to you, can you share it?
Sure, but you should be able to share
I
it.
know, no, it's a privacy setting thing.
Oh.
I thought it had, but it's not. I had practiced everybody,
Okay.
but it
Just
still
email it to
seems
me and I'll share it. Yep.
awesome.
Yeah.
So,
No worries.
sorry, guys. We will get this query letter up here and then just going to go away for a sec. Boop, boop, boo. Sending this to Rhonda. There we go. And now let's get me back up here. Yeah, and then we can take a look at things. All right, I'm back. So I'm going to show you Jordan's query letter. And one of the things that I want to reiterate here is, as much as agents want to keep an open mind and read everything, we're also humans. And there is such a thing as bias. And when I say bias, I don't mean on a person, but on a topic. Jordan just happened to tap into something that is a personal passion of mine, which is church architectural history. And it shows that you can do a really good job of researching agents. 1 second.
I'm not seeing it come through.
Okay.
I'm here clicking my button. Refresh.
It says sent. Click the lock to make changes. Yes. Okay, 1 second. Let's try this. So it's really important that you know that as much as we enjoy, it's really not letting me on here. Oh my gosh, can you refresh? I'm so sorry, guys.
I am refreshing constantly. I'm just not seeing.
Let's try this. So yes, when you do, and you might be like, well, how do I make sure that I know what an agent wants? A lot of us are on social media. A lot of us do events like this. Wow, it's really not letting me do this.
I am just going to
wait. Okay.
Accessibility, no.
Accessibility, okay. Privacy, Zoom, yes. Will not be able to record the contents of your screen until it's quit. Wonder if I can share the document in, wait, share. Wait.
There you go. You're there.
Oh,
Yep.
oh
So just click on
my
it
gosh.
and we're good to go.
It's amazing. Oh, sorry guys, especially sorry guys on the recording who are like, who is this moron and why can't she be professional? Um, all right, can you guys see my
Rachel,
screen now?
Rachel, before you start, can you say a little bit about the kinds of work you normally represent?
Oh, that's a really good question. So right now I'm currently closed because I got approximately 8 billion, slight hyperbole, queries before Christmas, and I just cannot get through them all. Um, I am really right now focused on commercial fiction, book club fiction, romance. I usually represent more broadly, but currently given market trends, that's what I'm focusing on right now. Um, I will never represent YA. I will never represent children's. I don't know enough about that. Um, and So I think it's really important that you make sure that when you're researching agents, you know what tracks they're in. And Twitter and Threads and Instagram and agent workshops like this, as well as following and seeing what other authors agents represent. If you read a book and you're like, I really like this book, go see who represents it. So right now I'm really focused on book club fiction, commercial fiction, stuff that has some magic realism in it. Um, it's it's a tough world right now in publishing, and it means that for the moment the book of your heart might not be the book that you want to put forward first. So that's what I do like romance, romantasy, historical romance. I'm pretty full on. I do like historical fiction that has a compelling hook. We're seeing more and more historical fiction that has non-United States settings being really popular. So that's kind of what I do, but no horror, no sci-fi, no fantasy. And the reason for that, and I'm sure some of you have heard me say this before, is that I don't have the connections or the industry knowledge in all of those places, right? And you don't want an agent who has no idea how to sell your book. Does that answer? Does anyone have anything else? And again, remember, put the questions in the chat and ask later. But yeah, so I wanted to show you Jordan's query letter, not because there's any such thing as a perfect query letter, but because it really got my attention. And part of the reason it got my attention is because I happen to be super obsessed with church architectural history. And anyone who follows me knows this. And I'm currently writing for our London, UK person. My biography of Sir Christopher Wren is due to my UK editor in like a month. Oh, and I love this stuff. And so I think it was really savvy of him to think not only of agents who represent the genre. This is from last October, by the way. So this is from a few months ago, but also it speaks to a niche interest of mine that perked up my little rabbit ears. So I've got some comments here that I'm just going to use to refresh myself here. But I thought that Jordan's, just as an overview, it's a fantastic query, but it really aligns with a particular moment of catnip for me, churches and abbeys. You won't always have this with an agent, but if you can learn something about them, it can be fascinating. I mean, how many agents share about the books they love or their personal hobbies or the fact that they have a cat? Sometimes I'll get a query and someone will say, by the way, there's a pet bunny. If you follow me on any socials, you know that rabbits are kind of my emotional support animal as we go through these dark, dark times. And I just really like another query that I got recently mentioned the film The Apartment, like because it's one of my favorite movies and I talk about it. And a lot of agents do give you little clues. It doesn't mean that you have to suck up to an agent. It's more casual, like I follow you, I know what you're into. Here's a way I could show that. So the other thing that I want to start with here is that Jordan opens on a really great branding line. When I'm reading a query, I'm doing so selfishly. I'm not only reading it because I want to get to know you and your book, I'm reading it with how much of this can I copy and paste into a submission package for an editor? How much of this work can I repurpose so I don't have to do my own? And he really gives me a lot here. When you're writing a query, you want to look at it as something very professional, but something that also almost mimics the back package of a book. And he starts with a really great branding line: a country in the grip of war, a murder in a house of God, a prior who carries a secret. I'm like, what? What is this? Now, one of the things that I always suggest, and Rhonda and I have done a few of these before where I go through your queries, is I personally feel that up front you should have the paragraph that tells us the genre, the word count, etc., the comp titles. And Jordan doesn't do this here, but I do use this as well as showing that even though I teach a different format of querying, this one still really found the right agent for it, me. So the prior is historical fiction with a difference. I'm like, what? What's the difference? What's the difference? A murder mystery layered with gothic suspense, traditional folklore, emotional intensity, and a thrilling, pacey narrative. This gives me everything I need to think about positioning it to editors. When I'm reading a query, I'm thinking, okay, this sounds good. What editors would probably like this? And how can I skew what he's given here in order to target an editor? So for editors I know who really like the folklore thing, I'd play that up. If editors really like pacey narrative, I'd play that up, right? So you can slide up and down the scale, and he's given me a wealth of information here. The sights and sounds and smells of 13th century Wales are vividly recreated. This is a story designed to keep haunting you long after you have finished reading it. It has been very well reviewed, and I've included a review sample at the bottom of this email. That's something that sometimes people do in queries. If you've got a blurb from an author who's been published or an endorsement, that helps us see that you've already tapped into the community. And I really think what stood out this way is that usually this time period is traditionally right now a tough sell in the marketplace. However, he's positioning why the story is so fascinating, even though it's set in the 13th century. And I will get back to this in a little bit. Prior Toby is sent to the Welsh Abbey of Strata, Florida to oversee its submission to the English king. While there, a young monk is brutally murdered, triggering a frenzied chain of events which will transform the zealous prior, forcing him to reckon with lies, conspiracies, ghostly whispers, and the haunting of his own past. It is a tale of power, of love, and betrayal prepared to be moved. I also really liked how assured and confident Jordan was in prepared to be moved. This is historical fiction with a difference, without being, I am the next Hemingway, I am the next New York Times bestseller. I get a lot of those, like, if you don't sign me, you're missing out on the next New York Times bestseller. That's going too far, right? That's aiming too high. And I also don't enjoy in queries when people pit their work against something else. Like, unlike other romances, mine is gritty and authentic. I hate that. This is a community. We're not pitting each other against ourselves. And Jordan here is saying you're going to be moved by this story, but not at the expense of anyone else in the genre. So I thought his branding altogether was really gripping. And I also thought, and usually, again, I think this is a nice blend of, it's not traditionally note for note what I will give feedback on in a query, but it was unique enough and compelling enough that it stirred me anyway. So I say this to encourage you, if you've sent out a query and then you go back or you go to a class and you're like, oh, I didn't do that on my query, they're going to write me off. That's not the case. As long as you get all of the information to us, my job is to just try and help refine queries with authors so that they have the best shot possible. And so usually we like a little bit more plot in this portion, but I really felt that this particular paragraph was strong enough for me to understand what's going to happen in the story. It's a really vivid image set against a time period and in a place that is particularly fascinating to me. So it just worked on that. And then I wanted to share this part because this is a perfect example of Jordan showing me that he has relevant and valid and legitimate writing experience that will amplify his ability to be able to do this. I first began to think of this concept when I worked at Holyrood Abbey in Edinburgh. If anyone's been there, it's so gorgeous. I was fascinated by the sense of romantic decay, how a place of such magnificence can become a desolate ruin. So already this is mimicking what he's going to pursue in this novel. And it just such my catnip. He tells us where, he grew up in the shadow of Welsh castles and he studied MA. Like he's got education, but it's not, I would say leave off education if it's not relevant to your book. It's something agents and you can talk about if you've done something really cool, but this just happens to give the validity for the magnanimous amount of research that goes into something like this. And then not everyone's going to have this, but his job is at the Charles Dickens Museum in marketing. So then I already knew this guy knows how to market his book. Not everyone is going to have that level, okay? So think of it on a lesser scale. What is something that you have that translates to your being able to sell your book if we sign it with a publisher? Do you run a book club? Do you have a following online somewhere, a Substack? It doesn't even have to be thousands of people if it's fiction. I'm just thinking of something you can cross-reference to prove I am part of this community. I am tapped into what's going on, and here's how I'm going to use that in my arsenal. So I also really like that he's written tour scripts. You know, when you go around and you put little earbuds in a museum, he's written some of those. And that really, I found that interesting. I know how to create compelling content and crucially how to hold attention. That's so fascinating for a novel, but for you, it could be something different. You could be an editor for a local newspaper. Anything you do in life that's relevant to why you are the best person for the job, because query letters are also a business document. So he wrote blogs, blah, blah, blah. He's got, he mentions he's got a readership of over 150,000. And then he gives us the stuff that I usually like at the beginning. He does mention here, and I wanted to point this out too. A lot of times people come to me because it's difficult because they tell their story in a separate way, or it's a dual narrative, or they're writing a synopsis and there's several different points of view, and it can be difficult. I really like it when, if in a query, you can tell me what's unique, not only about your story, but in the telling. So he's telling me this is almost 100,000 words, which is a long novel, but it's split into short chapters. And I found that really interesting. That was part of I was like, I want to see how he pulls this off. Then he goes into themes. Not everyone has to do this. I do know that he spent a lot of time on this query letter, but like so many of us, it was the first try, right? We do the best we can. But I would put all of this at the beginning of the query. You want to open with a keen idea of your genre, the word count, and then comparative titles. I like to see at least 3 to 5 comparative titles. Again, proving that this still worked, even though it didn't check off everything on Rachel's perfect query list. But the CJ Sansom Shard Lake series is a really good comparison for this. It gave me an idea of how to pitch this for people. And then what I really like in queries is when they can prove that, and this is where we get into his historical fiction with a difference. He's exploring the themes of faith and sexuality, and historically, records that proved that many monks back in the time did harbor same-sex attractions. And what I liked about that is it is showing that this will have contemporary resonance because diversity and all of this is still really pertinent right now as people try to use words as a sort of act of resistance, especially as we see pockets of people wanting to take away people's rights. I am just being so diplomatic today. You can read in between the lines and come up with whatever you want, but I did think that it's really fascinating that he's exploring the storyline of a gay monk. Now, I also wanted to point out that when I read the novel, and this is really important, the best issue books or the best books driven by a strong statement never pull out that statement. It's he shows us through a compelling story without telling us overtly, dear reader, this is we have core themes, but they're interwoven into the story. And I think that's the best way to use fiction in order to make a statement. And then please do let me know if you'd like to see a writing sample. I was like, I would like to see the whole thing. I've included one of my reviews below. So I wanted to walk you through that because I did find that it hallmarks a lot of the things that I find are really, really important in a query letter. And one of the things I wanted to mention is that we get a sense of his personality. And actually, people should go follow Jordan on Twitter, or he's a very delightful person, and he has a really cool job. He works at Charles Dickens' house, but it he's got a strong hook. He has a clear understanding not only of his readership, but how his book is going to be different than other books in the marketplace. He is a beautiful writer. That definitely helped. And it has personality. And agents, good agents, aren't just signing you for one book. We know that there are many books. The first book often dies on sub. I've had that happen where it's book 2 or 3 of a client. So we can't just sign you for one book. We have to sign you. And if you can give us an understanding of how you're an interesting person to work with. Again, not everyone works at the Charles Dickens Museum and worked at Holyrood, but you have comparable things that are unique to your life that would make an agent interested in partnering with you. Why is your book different? How is it saleable? And you don't have to pull out themes. He did that here because they were important enough to the statement he is making through this. But you can tell us why your novel is so important. And as I said before we started recording, pitch events on social media can be intimidating, but they're wonderful. And one of the things I see time and again in pitch events or agent guidelines or all the things people do creatively to share is the passion behind their projects. Authors who get really passionate about, this is what I'm working on now. I cannot stop thinking about my hero. I can't stop thinking about this setting or this world I created. That really gives us an indication of you are going to know how to sell your book because you already have a sense of audience. You're going to love this because I've created this magical world, or I've picked at this really interesting, lesser known period of history. There are so many ways that you can get an agent's attention in a really authentic way without being the best author ever. So I do shy away from I am the next New York Times bestseller, but telling me you will be moved by this novel is really interesting, or saying this is different than what you've read in this particular genre before. So he has a really good understanding of how to brand his novel, and I think that that's something that all of us can do a better job at. And it's really difficult, even for me, sometimes to summarize my novel in what we call an elevator pitch. I'm sure all of you have had this before. It's like, okay, I got 2 sentences. What the heck is my book about? I've written 400 words of it, but I still don't know. And I think that the more we can come up with branding lines like he has at the beginning here, and a really strong sense of our story without getting caught in the weeds. Another thing to remember when you're doing queries is that we're looking for some content and not just vibes, right? So sometimes they get too emotional without concrete information. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can get to some of these comments here and see them. But, oh, lots of comments. They really are a portal that will encourage an agent to take a look at your writing. And I know it can be really frustrating because you send out hundreds of these things and you often don't hear back, or it takes forever when, sometimes I request so few fulls because it does set expectation with the writer, um, that I sometimes feel guilty about. Uh, and then B, my job with my current clients is so busy all the time that I could literally work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week forever. So often authors are like, oh my gosh, she's had my full forever. Whereas in my time, I was like, how has it been 4 months already? I've had 7 clients go to pub board. I've had to work with this and this and this. There's always little fires to put out, that I don't want anyone to think that agents aren't interested just because of silence. And that's my other little query ramble here is I feel that really good agents never mind a nudge. And we never mind if you submit, I'm saying this for everybody. I can't speak for every agent, but if I turn down a query, as long as it's in a genre I represent and you have another book, I'm never going to not want to see something else. Often when we pass on things, and Rhonda's heard me say this a lot, it has nothing to do with you or your writing. It's often similar to something we have, or we can't just figure out how to sell it with the editorial connections that we work with. And I actually think it does a disservice to sign clients just to keep them in a roster. Because it's just me, I think it's 3 years since I've been an independent agent for 3 years, so it's just me. I respond to every query personally. I don't use form letters. Hundreds of thousands of hours to do that, but it's really important that I am taking on people that I know in my soul that I can place as quickly as possible. And some agents have the time and the means to sign people where it might be a slower trajectory, and that's awesome too. But I just wanted to walk you through that query letter because I thought that it really brings through a few things that are really integral. And those things are not just about being the most perfect writer ever, but Jordan showed us a bit of his personality and what was really important to him through the lens of fiction, and that really impressed me. He just happened to send a book that's my catnip. And then later I did ask him, as I asked some people who query me, how he heard about me, and it was actually from a mutual connection that we have. So he didn't lead with that because it was tenuous. It's a tenuous connection. Someone had said, hey, I know Rachel McMillan. She might really like this. I think that one of the things I see is people will name drop if they've interacted once with an agent or an editor. I'm not talking like you've pitched at a conference. I'm saying one time someone liked my Instagram post. That's not a connection. And it is a very small world and we talk to each other. So there's been a few times where I get a query and someone has said, by the way, so-and-so said to talk to you. And I've asked so-and-so and they're like, I've never heard of this person in my life. Don't do that. So the reason Jordan didn't bring up this connection is because it's a tenuous one. And he's like, that's where I heard of you, but I didn't want to impart that was, okay. So industry connections are important. And you might think, how do I get them? Well, Twitter and Threads, and so long as we have social media before the apocalypse, I think that it's really important to try and engage. A lot of agents are on socials. Things like this, you get to tap into a community. And another thing is to really support, this is now a tangent, but keep supporting authors that you love. I love seeing when people share my clients' books online. I love that. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're a writer and they liked this, to the point where I've actually signed a few people that I've gone after, where I've slid into their DMs and said, by the way, I know you write. Whenever you're ready, can you send me something? I really love the way you uplift the writing community. And that has been really helpful for me and for them. All right, Big Bear, California. So cool. I really love that quote he put on top. Yes. I would buy this book in hardcover, just saying. Right. It is a gorgeous book. How long should a query letter be? Well, this is a really interesting question. I personally don't use Query Manager or Query Tracker, but I know a lot of agents do. And a lot of people say, why don't you do that? Partly because I don't enjoy that they have little unhappy faces. I don't like that, where it's just like, you suck, unhappy face. And because I really like to respond personally, but I know that there's a character limit, so we can't always say, but basically a page. I mean, most query letters go into the body of an email. So I would say, oh, like usually they're about 500 to 700 words, I would say, most of the time. You want to have a really strong opening that gives your genre, your word count, an overview or hook line about your story, and then a few comps, then a paragraph or two about what the story is about, and then a paragraph about who you are. And when I say who you are, I have to say, I don't really care if you have a BA in English. I would say most people on the planet have a BA in English, it seems. I want to hear something really fun that has nothing to do with writing and more to do with why you would be a fun person to work with. So if you play the xylophone, that's kind of cool. If you have something that's a unique hobby or a pet, or I live like, I'm sorry, but Big Bear, California, like that's cool to me because like where you live, who you are, I really like to see that. The theme of faith and sexual, yeah. So coming up with themes that are using the past in order to extol or create a sense of something that's really important in discourse right now is pretty neat. Let's hope we sell this novel. And I shared Jordan's query letter within this particular forum with his permission in hopes that we can all act in good faith that we're not going to go off and ruin Jordan's life. He's a very nice guy. So he was kind enough to show us that, but I should hope that we will all extend him and his query letter the courtesy we would all like if we shared a query letter in this arena and not like copy it and share it to the world or steal his story or anything. Please don't do that. Thank you for all this. It's so useful. Do you have suggestions for how to craft an elevator pitch branding line? I don't, isn't it hard? I never know how to succinctly answer the question. Isn't it difficult? Okay, so, and please, when I say this, I'm off to teaching myself because I suck at this too. So I think you want to think bigger, universal rather than individual. You don't want just the feelings. You want, what is the thing in a Disney film? It's what they call the I want song. Like Ariel is like, I wanted, no, that's Belle, but Ariel singing about part of your world. Like, oh, she's a mermaid who really wants to get to land. That's the story. What's the big thing here? Or with Belle, she wants adventure. And oh, I answered that question a few years ago to dinner party, and the response was, yeah, you have to get better at that. Yes, it's really hard. But I think if you can find a way to talk to character motivation and what the stakes are, I'm just going to make something up. It's 1955 Sweden. And if this particular book isn't published within a year, then the government will fall. I'm totally making that. But what is the stake here? And I and George is the one who has the key to changing all of this. We did last week that a really I've seen some good query letters with this group, but escalating stakes that make you want to read the story. Now, some of you write small town contemporary romances, right? Sometimes it's not murder and mayhem. Sometimes it's a quiet story, like those pumpkin cafe spice books that are just everywhere and selling a bazillion copies. Then the stakes are still high within the perimeter of their world. So, like, will Lorelai Gilmore lose her small coffee shop? And what happens when a guy with a baseball cap on backwards infiltrates her life? But I think that if you can think of a stake and what's at stake for the character and why the reader will be invested, Um, oh, they're not, it's really hard. Do agents pass if the word count isn't enough for the genre? This is a popular question. My women's fiction novel has a word count of 76,000 words, and I'm worried it's too short. Usually we go for 80 to start, but 76,000, you're 4,000 off. I mean, I wouldn't pass on that. When I get, and I mentioned this last week with resilient writers, but every January I get a ton of novels that are 50,000 words because a lot of people do NaNoWriMo or the equivalent. And this is not a novel, everybody. 50,000 is too short. Jordan's book is just almost 100,000 words, and that is the tip of where you can get right now in romantasy and historical fiction, because it's print costs, right? Your entire advance, the price of your book is based on word count. That's why we're so stringent. And we have to be aware that things escalating in the world right now probably mean that paper and print costs are going to rise. So it's going to get even more stringent. So please keep your books shorter if you can. Often you can go through and just take out all the that's and the justs, and make sure you're not repeating yourself. Sometimes I read a book. I do this all the time in my own books. My own editor's like, you've made this point 4 times in different words. And I'm like, I know. This is why I've been writing the same book over and over again for the past 2 years. But make sure that you're doing what you can to keep your word count. Most genres are between 80 to 100,000 words, most genres. And yes, it does influence an agent, because when you're way over or way under, we're not only taking you on, we know it's going to be so much more editorial work before the manuscript is ready to send out to publishers. And so unless it's something absolutely mind-blowingly amazing, we have to think, oh, do I want to commit to that? So the best way to do this, and $76,000 or $76,000, maybe that's just my wishful thinking. 76,000 words for a women's fiction is not too far off. All right. Do agents pass? Yes. I'm not on X or Meta. Yes. If I wanted to pursue, could I? Oh yeah, guys. If querying email on Publishers Marketplace, yeah, find me wherever and just be like, if you're on Instagram, I've got a Facebook author page, and a Publishers Marketplace, my email's in there. I had to take it down for a bit in December because I was getting bullied by these troll bots, but it's back up there. Yes. Your novel should be done before you query agents. Yeah, absolutely. Nonfiction, it doesn't need to be done because we can send sample chapters, but especially if it's the first. If you're a multiple writer who's had several books out, sometimes that's different, and editors and agents will consider you based on a sample of your writing because you have had published work before and you've got that history. But absolutely, I can't do a lot without a published novel. And if you're at a conference or a pitch event online and you don't have a novel finished, often we'll say, okay, when you're finished, can you send it to us? And then just make sure you remind us, hey, I met you at such and such, and you asked to see this and now it's done. How important is the title when you're reviewing a fiction query? Not important to me at all because it's probably going to get changed anyway. I've been playing with the idea of changing the title of my novel, snippet of Shakespeare quote, that's cool, and not easily accessible in terms of meaning until you've read the whole book. So here's the deal with titles. I've had over 20 books published and I've been able to keep one of my titles so far. And that is something that you have to get used to, is there's a titling committee when your book is sold, and don't be married to your title. And it's always going to be publicity and marketing and sales who want it changed to align with Amazon algorithms, how to sell into trade places. That's why every other freaking book is someone's daughter or someone's wife, or you see the same titles, and it's because, yeah, those things sell. So then they just, copy paste and find a way for that to sell. And I mean, titles are important, but they do change a lot. So don't put all of your time into the title. Yeah, Laura just said what I just said. Why, with all the talk about it shorter in attention, the cost, why aren't novellas more popular? Because they're hard to sell and people don't want to invest in printing them because they're short. Um, and I think they're shortened attention spans to some degree, but we all know that, like, those dragon books, there was one out this week, I forget the name of it, but Rebecca Yarros, those books are selling a bazillion copies, and those things are freaking huge, and people are taking weekends and they're taking time off work just to read for 2 days. So novels are popular, but print costs are, it's been difficult for printing in the last 5 years as the world just keeps getting scarier. Why would how important is platform if you were interested in a manuscript by an unpublished author? For me, if it's nonfiction, I need at least 50,000 followers on something, at least, because at pub boards, it's often what shuts it down. All this to say, the last thing that an acquiring editor, asks of me before they pitch my book to the publishing committee to see if they're going to make an offer is what the social media stats are for a author. I like to see that you're somewhere online and connected to the community. It doesn't have to be amazing. You don't have to have a billion people. But look at how much has changed in the past week. Before, everyone said you have to have a TikTok. And then in America, TikTok was banned for a weekend. And then everyone used to say you have to be on Twitter or X. But now a lot of people aren't on Twitter or X as a form of resistance. I will stay on there because my form of resistance is to use that platform to help as many authors as I can. And I am going to use it in an altruistic manner. But then we go and we see that Meta, a lot of people don't feel comfortable using these platforms. And so we're going to see a resurgence of Substacks. And guess what else we're going to see a resurgence of? Everyone going back to blogging like they did in 2013. I'm going to dust off my blog. So for me, it's more about knowing that you are somewhere where you can engage with readers. And it can be as simple as sharing books you loved, sharing quotes you like, sharing pictures of your cat. Always remember that you are in control of what you share. A lot of people do share deep dives of their homes and their kids. Not everybody wants everyone to know the more intimate details of their life. And you have control of just saying, no, I will share about these things just so I have somewhere as a landing page. Is there a significant difference between query letter formats in the US and the UK? Again, it's really, I mean, I sign, Jordan's the UK client from the UK, and I see a lot of them are similar. I say just write the query as pertains to where you live, and the right agent will not care. I rep about 5 UK-based authors right now. And their query letters were all awesome. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, so long as you're getting the important information across. I'm still figuring this out. So far, I've heard cover letters, not query, are shorter, less stringent in format, and the pitch itself is less than 100 words. This is great. So I actually will defer to Laura because I haven't tried to query there. But you can see here someone in the UK pitching into North America with a letter, and that went over. But yes, it did work. And it's not the first time it's worked. Onyx Storms, that's it. Do you add the ending to your story in a query letter? Save it for the synopsis. That is a synopsis thing. Will the character choose life or death? Yeah, like that's what I want to know. And just like your query letter inspires us to open the manuscript, it also inspires us to want to read your synopsis. And the synopsis is the most annoying pain in the ass part of publishing for everybody in the world. And you have to do them for every contract, and it sucks. However, their purpose is to let people know you know how to tell a story from A to B to Z to Z. So the whole thing, you've got control of that. And just to touch on this UK US thing, I really feel, I'm in Canada, I rep people in Australia. The only thing that gets difficult is time zones. If you are just querying US agents, you are shutting off a huge part of the publishing industry. The big five publishers often have imprints in all countries. So I'm with my books are with Harper in the US, but I have a Canadian Harper publicist for the distribution here. I have one in the UK. I mean, tap into it. You want to query everywhere. Some agents will not sign people who are geographically that far away, but most of us don't care. Most of life is done online right now. I just sold a UK author to an American publisher, and she's written a cowboy romance. Like, there are no rules anymore, right? And the world is bigger. So yes, that was a tangent because I'm known for those, but give us that really compelling hook. Trivia question: if an agent hasn't specified one way or the other, should you send a writing sample with the query letter? No, don't do that. If they haven't specified, wait until they ask. I mean, most agents are nice humans, and I would never write someone off for that, but I do like the control of saying, hey, in the UK, writers will nudge agents when they get full manuscript requests. Yes, no, definitely. Oh, sorry. I thought you meant blah, 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 to see. I personally don't care if you get a full manuscript request. I only like hearing if you've got an offer because that creates a sense of urgency. Full manuscript request just means that someone else is reading your book. It doesn't give us any kind of guarantee. I have a couple of friends who published a book with a small press, and that press went out of business a few years back and rights reverted back to the author. Can they pitch an agent with those books? Yes, but if the rights are theirs, absolutely. But the problem is, and I've talked about this before with small publishers, many publishers will want to see the sales numbers from those books. So it can be a bit of a hurdle because you're already going in with smaller sales, right? But they can, and maybe the agent will have an idea of how to overcome those sales, but it can be a little bit tricky. But yes, absolutely, they could pitch that. And if they revised it and changed the title, even better, but I still think that that's a conversation that would eventually come up. Now, I will say this: if you've had an indie book published or a small press book published in the past, you don't have to include that in the query letter. I don't feel that's lying. I think that's choosing what information is going to inspire someone to open your manuscript, which is what the query letter should do. However, if you've had that in the past, if an agent offers representation, you have to disclose that in that meeting because we need to know that because it's going to be very essential when we're pitching to editors who also Google you, by the way. Editors will look up who you are, just like agents do. And that's not a bad thing. It's just like we want to get to know you better, but we also want to make sure that you don't have like this huge, conspiracy website. I'm not talking about being political online. I represent a lot of US authors, and many of them are on both sides of the political aisle, and it works just fine. Being political is important. Writing is inherently important politically. It's an act of politics just by writing, but we all know there's a difference between having a political opinion and then ostracizing yourself from everybody in the world with that political opinion. UK agents can be fussier because they receive funding from the government to promote UK writers. Yes, and we just saw an agency close this week because that funding was pulled, which is very sad. But they'll say, and this is great, Laura. Laura has done her querying homework. Yes, they'll often say international, but I've never minded. It's only in the past year that I've actually had a few Canadian clients. It's just not worked out that way. I'm not discriminating against my country folk. It's just I don't sign people based on location. Wow. Can you offer an example of what makes a query stand out to you when you're receiving hundreds of requests, especially in the absence of a personal connection? Absolutely. So one of the things I tell you is that you are actually probably further ahead than you think in terms of querying if you follow basic guidelines. I get so many queries on LinkedIn. I log into LinkedIn like once a month because I hate LinkedIn. My email inbox is full of query letters. It's an automatic no. If you query me, do you know how many people query me on Instagram Messenger? Automatic no. I need to know that you are going to be a good business professional partner, that I can work with you and the editors that I have such a good reputation with. So that is one way you're ahead of the game, just by following basic instructions like please don't send the manuscript unless asked. Another thing, word count. Word count is often why I will reject a query in 15 seconds. If your book is a romantic comedy and it's 145,000 words, I can't do anything with that. The other way that you're ahead of the game is, do you know how many queries I get for genres I don't represent? And often they'll say, well, mine's different. But it's not. It's set in space and I don't represent sci-fi. So you are wasting both of our time. That really bothers me. So by not doing that, you're already standing out. I think the queries that stand out to me the most are the ones that show you know the industry and where you fit. So comp titles help with this. A really strong hook helps with this. You know how you fit into the industry. You read enough about the industry. You don't have to read every book in your genre or even your comp titles. You just have to have an idea of painting the picture of this is why this will sell. But you also show not only why it will sell, but how it fits a need or fills a gap, right? So right now there are 80,000 romantic, I speak in hyperbole, 80,000 romantasy books being picked up in Publishers Marketplace deal memos every day. So if you're writing in a genre, how is yours different than the many that I see, right? You don't have, I mean, people, comp titles are to show that your book will sell. I think sometimes people take them far too seriously. Like, well, my girl character has a dog, but this one doesn't have a dog, so I can't use that. Comp titles exist to paint a picture for people who are never going to read your book, i.e., the salespeople who are going to purchase your novel to sell at a publisher, that your book will sell. So when you're thinking about comp titles, think about, what is the ideal reader for my book? Is the ideal reader for my book Rebecca Yarros or Sarah J. Maas? Is that my, if they like their books, will they like mine? You can often figure that out without reading the comp titles. The other thing I'm seeing more and more that I really like is throwing in a media comp title. I get Taylor Swift songs as part of the comp, like the vibes of insert Taylor Swift song here, or any, the bear, the bear comes up a lot these days because people are writing kitchens and culinary stuff, and I think that's fantastic. If you're writing something that crosses genres such as historical, speculative, or historical mystery, do you pitch agents who do? Yeah, I would, because sometimes agents will say, and I think I'm guilty of this, historical fiction, and they don't mention the subgenres. So I think that, and Rhonda, we've done this before with that really interesting query about the turbines. Um, where it's kind of speculative, kind of horror, and it crossed lines. I would play up what the agent likes. If they represent historical and mystery, smush those together. If they represent historical and they don't mention speculative, then maybe play down the speculative elements. You want to, ideally, the worst you can do is send a query to someone and you're wrong and they don't want it. And it's sad, but that's okay. Historical covers a lot of broad places, and historical speculative, I mean, it's like romantic speculative. Magical realism is back, right? Um, I would shoot your shot and then let the agent decide if it's too out there for them. If I'm querying in one genre now, but have plans to write a book in a different genre next, should I start with querying agents that represent both genres? Yes, I think it saves time. Now, I will say, full disclosure, I don't do YA or teen, but I have a few clients who have more than one agent because they have a separate agent for their YA books. Um, I also have clients whose books that I've repped have been optioned, so they have an agent for their film and TV stuff because I don't do that. Beware the agent that says they do everything. How many agents can possibly also have an entire background in Hollywood? Like, come on, I don't know that world. um, and some agencies, bigger New York agencies or London agencies, have someone specifically dedicated to that. But be ye warned and pick one book and stay in that lane for a while. The book that you're pitching to agents should be the one that you foresee getting in the door with. So I'm going to get really braggy for a second, but I don't mean to be. I actually write in several genres now, but I started in one. And then I've done contemporary romance, and then I've done some nonfiction, some travel books. Now because I wrote a book called The London Restoration that had a lot of architectural history, a UK editor reached out and said, hey, would you like to write about Christopher Wren? And I'm like, yes, because I am this much of a geek. So I now write in several genres. However, I started my career with one track and then moved to another publisher in the same track and then have been able to branch out. But you want to get in the door, and we get confused if you're pitching us too much stuff at once. So if you've got this one book and you're leading with that, but then I also write YA and fantasy and have 3 children's books, like that's confusing for us. Those conversations come up later. I have several clients who write in more than one genre. Many can currently write for more than one publisher. But give us the thing that you're leading with and stay in that lane for a while, and we will have that discussion on an offer of representation when we talk about your career. And a good agent will want to know your career goals, right? Um, UK agents love to write oh my gosh, right? General fiction. What does that mean? Yeah, we all suck at that. Canadians suck at that too. I think my novel might be magical realism, but I'm not sure. What books would you consider to be magical realism? Anything by Joanne Harris, Chocolat. I would say, oh my gosh, Sarah Addison Allen, Matt Haig, Midnight Library, Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I would Salman Rushdie does a lot of magical realism. Anything that has moments that cannot be explained in the perimeters of, logic. So if she's a chef, but she has this keen sense of whenever she sprinkles cinnamon, people fall in love or something like that, that's magical realism. These are such good questions, and questions are my favorite part of all this stuff. So does anyone have anything else that they'd like to ask about anything, publishing or in general? Please remember, when I give you information in forums like this, I'm speaking the best I can from a place of integrity from who I am and my experience. I am not the be all and end all, and I'm still figuring a lot of stuff out. And I think my clients know that too, because I'm like, I actually don't know. Let's figure this out together. So you're going to get a lot of different opinions from different agents if you go to different things. But at the end of the day, I still do feel that the right books will find the right agent and people will be happy. It's going to take longer, but you have so many more opportunities now to publish. Did you know that so many more independent novelists are making far more than trade novelists do? I think it's really important to know that the industry is broad. Alice Hoffman, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Toni Morrison. Yes, also really good ones. How contemporary do the comps need to be? Can I use Margaret Atwood, Ray Bradbury, and Ayn Rand? I never say her name. Okay, so those are biggies that paint really big pictures, but we like them to be in the 3 to 5 or year range. However, something that is like a cultural juggernaut, like The Handmaid's Tale, immediately paints a picture, right? But make sure you follow it up with a few more current examples that show that it's still relevant. Lord of the Rings is another big one. Like, people are like, can I use Lord of the Rings? It's still in the cultural consciousness. So you want to make sure that people are at least aware of what you're comping and that it's not archaic. And these are big people who have written books that have permeated culture in such a way that they do help us paint a picture. Synopses critiques. How long do you want to see? Oh, a synopsis is usually a few pages, single spaced. I think they usually are around 1,000 words. Bit of a specific question regarding historical fiction. Do you think Renaissance is hard to sell since, okay, this is a really good question. And yes, in the past, since I've been agenting, Renaissance has been a tough sell. It really has been. But times are changing, and I still feel a really good hook can overcome reticence on this. And with Jordan, I had enough editors in mind who are just sick of seeing, and I say this with all the love in the world to the genre I've been writing in, which is World War II and post-war. People are a little bit sick of World War II and post-war. And I am sick of myself. But I think that the borders are broadening. Thank you, Rachel. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much for coming. It's really fun to connect with authors. And I really like so few of you get the opportunity to actually ask an agent questions, and I want to be available for that without being taken advantage of. Sometimes if it gets too far, I have to have someone book a consult with me or have me do a query critique because I just don't have time to help everybody one-on-one. But if we can ask questions and have answers that everybody here is benefiting from, hopefully we all learn a little something. Any advice on dealing? Okay. Yes. On dealing with inevitable rejections that come with being in the query trenches, especially on ways to stay hopeful if you truly believe in your book. Okay, so start believing in your writing and not in your book, because your book, the book that got me my first agent, has still never been published. It may never be published. So I loved that book, and apparently it was good enough to get an agent, and it had multiple offers, but it never got a book deal. So start believing in your writing, anomalous to your book. Please remember that the rejections that happen in the query trenches are building you up for the trajectory of constant rejection that will happen throughout the rest of your publishing career. Right now, I feel people think that once they get a book deal, their career is set. At the end of every contract, you have to pitch again. And if your sales numbers are not high enough, you don't get another contract. A lot of six-figure debuts never see another contract. You get rejected by editors who want to change your title or who have a right of first refusal on an upcoming book and pass on the idea because they don't think it will sell. You get rejected by readers who will send you their one-star reviews of how terrible your book was. You get terrible reviews from Kirkus. This girl. Yeah, I like those days where I get like a starred review in Publishers Weekly and starred review in Library Journal, and the Kirkus is like, this is the worst book we've ever read. It sets you up because rejection is always gonna happen. You'll get rejected for a big trade promotion or box store that you really wanted. So I think it's important to don't put all your eggs in the basket of writing, because it most likely will never be your financial center. Advances are going to keep getting lower and paid out over more increments as print rises cost and there are fewer traditional slots. It only takes one person. And if you keep going on with one book and you're not finding any success, it's up to you, the timeline for this. Pitch something else. Don't put everything, if it is just about getting the book of your heart in front of readers, consider self-publishing. If that is your main thing, because traditional publishing is far too hard for that. And it's easy to get discouraged. But one of the things I like about writing community on Threads and on Twitter is, yes, there's that opportunity to compare yourself to other people who seem to be escalating faster. But there's also that communal sense of commiserating about how difficult it is. And always remember that the authors you think are overnight successes are usually 15-year overnight successes. It just takes, one of my very good friends, Kate Quinn, Now all of her books hit the New York Times bestseller list. But she tells me a lot, and she wouldn't mind me telling you that she always says, because she had so many books before, if Alice Network had not crossed Reese Witherspoon's desk and become a Reese's pick, she's not sure where her career would go. As much as there's an amazing amount of hard work, and she's a brilliant writer who works really hard, she's also aware that there's a lot of this industry that is sheer luck and timing. We've all read books where we're like, how the heck is this popular? How the heck is this popular? The writing is terrible. We think it's terrible, but a lot of it is luck. Trends in publishing right now. Okay, so we've done rejections, trends, and what's going on with editors and publishing houses that we should be aware of. I think that we need to see a little bit. We know that the US is the publishing juggernaut, and we know that there's several things happening in the US right now with a new administration that could change a lot of things, including what is allowed to be published. I think that especially in terms of romance and romantasy, there is a perception that there could be more of a shooting down of things that are a bit more explicit in alignment with what is seen as, how do I say this diplomatically? There's a thing called Project 2025, and I think that any US author should maybe read through that because it does mention books and publishing. Another thing that is being stirred around, and we still have to wait a few weeks, is to see about some of these tariffs and taxes that are possibly going to be implemented on people. I happen to live in a country that has the world monopoly on soft pulp trees and paper, which is very important for the printing of books. And we know a lot of books are printed in China. And so I think we have to see what's going to happen there. And I also think we have to see, in terms of trends, when COVID happened, book sales boomed. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom here, and I'm really not trying to pick a political side. I am trying to just give information as I know it. Book sales boomed. Romance became the biggest. Romance is single-handedly saving the publishing industry. Romance saved Barnes and Noble, and brick and mortar stores, like actual bookstores, now dedicated just to that genre. So I think going ahead, we have to think, when you have such you have someone in power right now who is an ostracizing figure globally, for better or worse, wherever you stand, how is this current administration going to be reflected in what people want to read? There are many people who feel that they need to resist some of the things that this person and his administration stand for. So are we going to see fiction that has a more dystopian or resistance type slant? Or is it going to be cupcakes and bunnies because people feel that the world is really big? So I posit all of this to say it's easy to shut off the news, and we all want to, but as authors, we are positioning ourselves within a huge conversation, whether or not we want to be in a conversation. And you can say, I don't write political books. The act of writing itself is political. Even if you're writing a romance, even if you're writing a space opera, it is political, and people will read it and in turn inter whatever they want to from that as a reflection of their experience with the world. But I will say I'm seeing a lot of romantasy, a lot of books about books and bookshops. Everyone has a book about a bookshop. Books and bookshops and magical bookshops, Matt Haig, Midnight Library, things that are just a little bit, that have a little bit of that magical element to them. I think we're seeing a lot of that. Something I think we're going to see more of is shorter, not easier to read in a diminutive sense, but Nita Prose, The Maid, really voicey, takes a few hours to read, nice mystery with a very interesting protagonist. I think we'll see more about that. And I think that, Severance, that show on Apple TV, is a pretty huge deal. And it kind of mirrors a lot of workplace culture, but also some horror, some comedy. I think we're going to enter an age where we see the lines blurred between genres, where we get back to people wanting a good story and it doesn't matter what it's called. And then, of course, we've got the big vague terms that nobody understands, like women's fiction. And I hate that term. Like, where's the men's fiction? Women's fiction up market, which is voicey but also commercial. And I think more historical time periods, because people really do like to find themselves in moments of adversity by seeing how other people have overcome things. And I think that's really important. All right. That was a very big answer. And I am very, very determined to try not to ostracize and offend anyone. I just think it's important for us to look at these big issues because it is a big change in the world, because of publishing being very much where publishing is. Obviously, where it's located has a big effect on the entire world and the entire industry. So I would encourage all of us to watch it without doom scrolling at 2 a.m. Rachel, stop doing that. Play Candy Crush instead. Can you say something more about your synopsis query critiques? What do you do and what to prepare for it? Okay, so I do these critiques, and what happens is people send me a query letter in Word and synopsis and then 15 pages, because I find that's the usual package for things. And you send it to me in Word and I give you feedback in track changes of where I would move things, what I would do, how I would strengthen it. But I also try really hard to be the person who is not just critiquing. I'm also going to tell you what you're doing really well, and I try to be super encouraging. So I'm currently doing these for most people will do a query letter alone for 150. I usually do 50 to 75 for the whole package. And the reason I have to charge that is because they take me a lot of time. They are very time consuming and I care a lot, but you'll get a full edit on those 15 pages, as well as my help on your query letter and synopsis and what I think you should draw out more and what you can cut. And my little brag for the moment is I do have a really good success rate with people getting agents and editors. Like, a lot later, someone will be like, "Hey, Rachel," and I'll be like, "Oh, that was this story? That was really good. I'm so glad you," because I do so many, I can't always remember who the people are, but I try my best. And that's really important when I do things here too, is Rhonda's the same way. We want to keep things affordable because so many authors cannot afford to go to conferences in person. They can't afford the travel cost. They can't afford the hotel. I think that this is really important, that we are able to provide something that is still encouraging you to invest in your writing. I mean, you paid to show up today. That means you've invested something. And so you're taking your writing seriously, but also not making it so that you have to be of a certain income level in order to be able to connect with agents and editors. That's not fair. Oh, subreddit for rejected at acquisition stage. Oh, that would be good. Oh my gosh. That is always the most disappointing because we spend hours getting ready for the acquisitions board or the pub board and it looks really good and you're like, oh, there's a 97% chance, and then one person shoots it down. Boo. I hear that memoir, except celebrity, is getting difficult to publish and find representation for. Is it still worth seeking an agent for a memoir, or is it best to start looking at small presses, university presses? No, oh, I get what you mean, not worth it. Okay, so yes, every story is valid and memoir is valid, but it is notoriously hard to sell. Carly Waters, and one of the agents who does Shit No One Tells You About Writing, she has a really good Instagram post about this from a while back. If you search her Instagram about why she doesn't take on memoir. And yeah, it's because it's really hard to sell. And it's partly because nonfiction does usually suppose that you have a rather large following, and that's really hard for people to get, right? Also, remember with memoir that a story that's super important to you and your family may not be super important to the rest of the world. And I don't say this to be mean. I say this to be, of course, you're passionate about your family history, but is it so unique that the rest of the world will invest in that as well? And I think we're finding editors who just don't think the hook of the memoir is strong enough. But that being said, it's really important that you have that documentation, that written history. So that's why I often suggest that people go through an independent publish path for that. We do see successful memoirs, but I think that it's going to still be difficult. But I never want to say there's not an agent for that, because I do think there's an agent for everything. Sometimes I pass on things knowing someone else will pick them up. And that's, I think we have to keep that idealism. Your comments on matters in the US. Do you think it will become more difficult to get books with queer themes represented, published by US agents publishers? My novel's protagonist is non-binary. Well, I can't speak to this because A, I'm not American, and B, I don't make any of the laws. But we did see early on this week that one of the first things that happened was a very strong definition on what genders there are. And as for resistance, I think publishers in a democracy with free speech will still want to publish things that are going to be, you know, providing a different viewpoint of the world, which is why I think publishing is so important, no matter what political regime is in power or no matter who's in charge of whatever. Publishing is a way that we can use, especially novels, as a way for people to find comfort in books. But we also saw that some of the legislation around book bans is being um, cut back on. So I can't say for certain, but I will say this from a place of conscience is that if we stop writing diverse books in anticipation of being silenced, then every time that there's been moments of adversity in history, we still read the voices that prevailed through that, right? So I would say, why deprive prospective readers of your voice and experience just because there's a few things happening? I don't think publishers really want to turn into the place where books go to minimalize the viewpoints that are out there. Um, so I think, yes, Rhonda, there will always be space for resistance in different ways, including LGBTQ plus stories, among others. Also have to remember, as I said about being represented by agents all over the world, the US is not the only place in the world that publishes books. I mean, I sell into the UK a lot. They have big imprints there too. So publishing, you can go, and this is by no way. I love working, most of my publishers in America. I love American publishers. But if you want to have a broader base, no matter what you write, whether it's a diverse opinion or something else, there's a big world of publishing out there. Do you have another query letter you could show us? I wish I did. However, I did not get permission from anyone else. And that's understandable. Query letters are an intimate thing. That's why when Rhonda and I do those little workshops with the queries, I'm always so privileged when people share, because it is such a deeply personal thing. And I think that my other clients have said this is just not something that I'm comfortable with you sharing right now, especially the non-published authors, the ones who aren't published yet. So alas, no. However, if you go to Jane Friedman or to Query Shark, Google Query Shark. Janet Reed unfortunately passed away last year, but she has a repository of all sorts of excellent query letters. Thank you for the time. I will have to watch the rest of the recording. Well, I ramble a lot, so I hope you find it useful. How best to contact you? Do you know what? For everyone here, I'm just going to put down my email address, rachkmet@outlook.com, and just reach out to me. And yeah, I did want to offer a bit of a discount for this group. So if you send me your stuff, I can probably work out 50 for that package. Again, most people do 150 just for query letters. So saving you $100 and you're getting a lot more. What's the current agency commission rate? 15%. If anyone says more, they're actually terrible and don't sign with them. It might be an opportunities for publishers in the UK. Yes. And there's lots of, Simon and Schuster Canada, Penguin Canada. We've got a lot of cool stuff here too. I don't want anyone to think I am bashing US publishing. Please. It is my bread and butter and I love it. And I love the editors and clients I work with there. But I think we all have to be aware of how things change. And it's important as writers to keep an eye on some of the things that are happening politically because it does influence what we publish. Thank you. Okay, good. Realistic thoughts. Just trying to be aware. And I think it's good to decide in moments. It's not like my country's perfect. Rhonda will tell you, good Lord, we've
Well,
got our
Sherry, it's
stuff.
all the same stuff worldwide.
It's
It's all
all
the
the
same.
same stuff. But this is why writing stories is so important, right? We see throughout history, the writers are the ones that capture what the world is like for future generations. And writing is a very immediate experience where someone can go have a conversation in private to think about viewpoints that are different than their own. And I think that's really important, right? People can sign out a book from the library and not have to have conversations with loved ones. They can think, I'd like to learn a bit more about this, and I can have this conversation with this book. So we're all doing important work by writing books, no matter where we stand on a political spectrum. Does anyone else have any questions? I have rambled at all of you for a very long time. I do hope you found that query letter informative. Again, not because it was a perfect query letter in terms of what the industry or the conferences you go to would posit, but it was the perfect query letter because agents really do like a good story with some personality. And I think sometimes we get so tied up in, oh, did I do that right? Oh, did I do that wrong? That at the end of the day, it's just a really compelling story that fits with us, that makes us want to work with you. Aw, thank you so much. I am so happy to see so many international people here. The writing community transcends borders, right? We are all working together on a global scale, and we're a pretty powerful force wherever you are in the world today. So it's
So
my
good.
absolute pleasure to show up and help people, and please do reach out to me.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing, Rachel,
Oh, thank
as
you.
always. And I love the realism, but also the encouragement to, to keep going and to think of your career in the long
Yeah.
term, not just about this one book. And thank you so much. And please pass on our thanks to Jordan for letting you
Yes.
share that letter.
I think he was kind of flattered. He was like,
Yeah. And
really?
also just tell him that we need that book published like
Right.
ASAP
It's gonna be
because we
so
all want to read
good.
it. It sounds so good.
Yeah. Uh,
So good.
and
Um,
do follow me online, everybody. Come and
yes.
find me.
Please. Yeah. So good. All right, I think we'll hold it there. I will send out a recording to because I think we've got a few more people who couldn't make it live, but really wanted the insights. So thank you so much. This has been great, everyone. Take
Thanks
care.
for having me. Have a great Saturday. Bye.
Take care. Bye.